Assalamu alaikum, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Zulfikar Bhutta. I'm the founding director of the Institute for Global Health and Development here at Aga Khan University. I also head the Center for Global Child Health at the Hospital of Sick Children in Toronto. It is my great privilege and pleasure today to invite you to this inaugural panel discussion and podcast on what I think is one of the huge challenges that academicians, policymakers, researchers face globally, which is the issue of how do you promote gender equality in science and technology, and to make it possible for particularly women, younger women, early career scientists, to be able to contribute to national development. And I'm absolutely thrilled to welcome some of my heroes and colleagues to this panel. Let me start by our distinguished Senator Javed Jabbar. He's an award-winning writer. I brought a book to get it signed by him. Followed his work for almost 50 years. He is a policy analyst and has had a distinguished career spanning public service, media, intellectual life in Pakistan. As I mentioned, he's a former senator, but I was also a minister of science and technology at a very influential time in our history. So we are very honored that you are here with us. On his left is the Chief Academic Officer of our university, Professor Tania Boubala. She's the Provost and the Vice President Academic and is an internationally recognized scholar in health law, policy, and innovation. So to many young girls in the audience, Professor Tania Boubala's story is a story also of intense, focused academic development and also the diversity in her career from a basic biomedical scientist to somebody who also bridged law and its implementation and academic governance. On my left is another dear colleague that I've known for a couple of decades now at least. Professor Ziaul Haq is an internationally recognized public health expert, an academic leader who has served as the Vice Chancellor of Khyber Medical University, my home province, and is currently, if I'm not mistaken, the youngest executive director of the Higher Education Commission of Pakistan. And freshly minted, just a few months in the post, he's already begun to cause ripples and has a huge opportunity of influencing science policy in at least the Higher Education Commission. And I should also acknowledge that today he's been accompanied by many of the leaders from Higher Education Commission themselves. The directors are here, and I hope they'll have a chance to ask questions in the question and answer session. And our fourth and final panelist is none other than Professor Zahra Hassan, who I have no doubt in saying is probably one of the most distinguished scientists in the academic circles in Pakistan. She's a molecular biologist and the director of the PhD program in health sciences at the Aga Khan University and has done seminal work in infectious disease molecular diagnostics. And if I go through the list of her contributions to just the COVID-19 pandemic and understanding some of the science around this that I witnessed firsthand, those contributions are global in terms. So without further ado, let me start by prefacing why we are here today. To a number of people, particularly in the lay community, the question as to whether there is gender inequality in education or science is an unusual one, because what is commonly thought of is almost 70-80% of our medical school entrants are girls. So where is the gender inequality that we are talking about? But the reality is that there is a very leaky pipeline. That although we may start at source with a lot of women, a lot of young girls, smart as they are, making it to higher secondary education, even at undergraduate program levels to med schools and universities, the rubber hits the road when they start their careers. As many people have said, one of the most difficult barriers to bridge in public health and global health after graduation from your master's program is finding your first job. And one of the biggest barriers that female scientists face, scholars, is principally finding career positions where they can grow in their academic careers at the same pace as their male counterparts. And there are many barriers to this that relate to our social cultural milieu, and we'll discuss some of that, but they also relate to the structures that have been organically put in place in our institutions, in our organizations, in the private sector. So reflect on some of the facts that I'm going to give you. That despite the 70-80% proportion that we have in our med schools and university entrance, when it translates into academic positions, that figure drops very rapidly to around a quarter. And that from that 20-25%, if you look at how many women rise up to academic leadership positions, that figure halves even further. So out of the 108 universities in Pakistan, there are only 14 female vice chancellors, right? That's not to say that they're not deserving women in an environment where they have career pathways that come through this. I was mentioning this morning in our discussions with the Higher Education Commission, if you look at the reflection of how science and STEM sectors, science, technology, mathematics, engineering, how these disciplines are recognized at the national level. If you look at the last 7-8 years in terms of civil awards, and our entrant civil award is the Tamgha Imtiaz, which recognizes excellence. There've only been 14 civil awards given to women scientists out of over 130. So there is something wrong. And if it's not wrong, then it is something that we probably need to understand a little better in terms of what's happening over there. So I won't give you any more stats, except to say, because this was a problem, that we focused a lot of energy in our institute to look at how this fundamental issue could be understood and how we could do something about it in terms of addressing this gender gap in science. And that's why we have had a Women in Science program, which is not the focus of discussion today, but we've been trying to walk the talk in doing something about it. So I want to start by asking our distinguished panelists a series of questions which I would like you each to reflect upon succinctly so we can go across and cover the breadth of the topic. And because of this confusion around whether the problem is real or is imaginary, I want to ask you, is this question real, Senator Saab?
Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. First of all, thank you very much, Dr. Zulfikar Bhutta, for this invitation. It's a privilege to be here with three distinguished, eminent persons and yourself, and in this great institution. The subject is extremely pertinent, and you've asked me a question which, without detracting from the immediacy and validity of your concern, I think the roots are historical. Historical in two ways. One, going back to the dark ages of Islam, which come after 200 years of enlightenment and tremendous promise. The 9th century, when a Tunisian woman migrates to Fez in Morocco and sets up the world's first university, starting from a mosque and a madrasa. Fatima al-Fahr, al-Faharin was the name of that university. Starting so well. And then 200 years of Baghdad, the house of wisdom, and then Islam enters into this dark age from which we are just barely recovering. To today, in Pakistan, look at the pronounced disparity between entrance into primary education, which has been increasing. Girls have been going into primary education. Before we come to SNT and STEM, we have to start from the base. There are 185,000 primary schools in Pakistan. Then there is a 400% decline to middle schools. 400%. You go from 185,000 to 47,000 middle schools. And then there's a further reduction to secondary. And then there's a giant leap down to the number of colleges, 7,000 colleges, out of which the bulk is for male students. So girls start with this inaccessibility to education long before we talk about science and technology. So whether there is this historical malady, which I didn't mention, there is also a deep-rooted universal sexism and misogyny, not peculiar to Islam. I find that across non-Muslim worlds also, a bias, an inability to accept women as equals. That is why it took even Europe, with its so-called Enlightenment, hundreds of years to recognize. France recognized the right of women to vote in 1944. The country which calls itself, the French Revolution, liberty, equality, fraternity, 18th century. And it takes them almost 200 years to recognize the right of women to vote. So Islam is not alone. This is a human condition. And we are still struggling with this.
Very well put. Tanya, is this a global issue? I mean, are we looking at Pakistan maybe through colored lens?
So first of all, thank you very much for the invitation to be here. It's a real pleasure. This is a global issue. And I think that there are degrees that make things worse in particular geographies. But I can tell you, I have spent my academic career in Australia and Canada, and many of these challenges are still very apparent and slowly improving, but it's taken a lot of work.
So, as in the West, why did it take them, as Javed said, hundreds of years to even begin to recognize this?
Well, these things are cultural, as you stated. It's very deep rooted, right? Part of it comes from religious bases, but also part of it comes from a culture of keeping women in the home, thinking of them as homemakers, thinking of them as child raisers, and not thinking about them or imagining them in different positions. So, for example, when you think of a leader, do you have an implicit bias when that first image of what is a leader pops into your head? Is it a man or is it a woman? Is it an older man? Is it a man of color?
Yeah.
So, Zia, from your perspective, not just as a scientist yourself and a father, and coming from a province which at times gets a lot of bad publicity in terms of misogyny, but now in your position as the Executive Director of the Higher Education Commission, is this issue real? Is there awareness of this even within the Higher Education Commission?
Yes, I think I must say that the issue is real. If you compare it with the men, so the issue is real. But I have looked to the statistic and I have shown you this morning that there is a constant improvement into this. So I'm not disappointed. I see the universities, the whole 270 universities as Executive Director office, and I see a lot of girls coming into the PhD, to the master, to the bachelor, even we are getting almost 70% in some cases. So I see a lot of leaders coming into to the society, and I've shown you that in terms of awarding research to the men and women, and we just looked yesterday into the statistic, and we found that there were 10% of the awardees as the PI were women. But that increases to 15%, to 20%, 25%, and this year we have 28% as female principal investigator in getting the research award. So we see a lot of improvement in Pakistan, in all provinces. Yes, in some provinces like Balochistan, we have still the issues there, maybe in some part of the KP, but I see, alhamdulillah, a lot of improvement and the recognition as well. And the women are doing brilliant job. It's not something that we are giving. They are proving themselves, and they are proving it to the society and everyone that they are, if not equal, they are maybe performing well than the men. So there is a recognition in the society, and the society as a whole is recognizing them as a leader, a competent leader. So I think if we give them another 5 to 10 years, you will see a lot of difference, and then maybe a time will come that we will be talking about the men. We are the men who have the leaders. I see this in the next 10 to 15 years.
So let's wait for that discussion in 10 to 15. The point is, do we have 10 to 15 years? I mean, so I understand the secular trends, the progressive change, and a pace that sometimes you need to compare with other exemplars to say, could we do better? So, Zara, coming to you, you've often spoken about the underpinnings of the barriers that women face in higher education, in jobs, in career pathways. Is the issue real?
Is real. And first of all, thank you for the opportunity. I'm so glad we're speaking on it. Picking up from Mr. Jabbar's statistics on schools and Dr. Zia's statistics on university, it tells us that our female students are doing academically well. So what happens to them later? It's studied quite a lot now. It's what do you need to get to the next step? It's the soft skills. It's learning to engage, learning to have advocacy, learning to, for example, learn skills that boys learn earlier. Those are now being discussed, like sports. You know, they have to learn to get out there and put themselves out. So one of the reasons that they have a gap is not just the socio-cultural norms that they have to play the roles that are expected at home, but the fact that even given the opportunity, they have difficulty. Perhaps they need more role models, they need a greater need to be accepted in different spaces. We can help with that. And I'd like to just say that the one really important reason that AKU is such a great employer for women is because it's thought of as a safe environment. So in all the pieces of education, transportation and mobility really are key pieces. Because when there's a shortage of resources, what do you put money in? Girls cost more to educate, to keep safe, to take to school, to bring back. So those are all issues that add up to costs.
The environment, safety,
The environment.
security, policies that absolutely stop harassment and those kind of things are hugely important. But let me ask you, if this issue is exaggerated within the STEM field in some ways, just because of fixed views that many people have, that a woman's role is in the kind of sciences that would be relevant to homemaking, and that, I mean, for a long time, people would, raise their eyebrows when you said, I have a daughter who wants to go into engineering, space technology.
I think it starts even earlier. Dr. Anjum's research on mathematics education showed that girls are taught less mathematics. So it's starting in the schools. They're scared to study the sciences in many cases. And biological sciences is almost like the soft, safe science, because it's, a path to medicine, which is an acceptable path. Wow. But then if you're in core science, what do you do? What do you do after your master's? It's very hard. There's no easy career path, because you need then to find or navigate to use the knowledge you have in spaces which are not straightforward.
So, Sansab?
No, she mentioned the word role models. And I have the dubious distinction of belonging to the media sector, partly. And the media is responsible for never portraying the outstanding achievements of many of our women scientists. Our women scientists never receive even a fraction of the coverage. Talk about role models, most of them are males. And this terrible game called cricket, which consumes hours every day, balls being hurled and balls being hit. And because it's an event, research and learning and knowledge, the pursuit is a process. I mean, it's like a baby being born. It's born after 9 months. But what goes in before that birth, that is research, that is quiet, that is magical. But media fail to focus on this magical aspect of learning and making it into as exciting as. So role models, great responsibility to promote this.
You do an analysis of our current mass media dramas, serials, season after season after season. There are very few career role models within them. They show very few women professionals in the role that people would emulate or understand.
And not to intrude, I'll shut up after this, but at the same time, simultaneously you see the visibility of women in advertising, in television drama, even in sports and cricket. Now women have become. So there's this bizarre anomaly that women are now today more visible in media as presenters, as anchors. They want to have a nice, pretty, intelligent woman talking to a male, unintelligent character like myself. That's the format for most news talk shows. So women are visible, but the real qualities of women, their ability to think independently of a male, that is very rarely projected. And may I just conclude by naming some of the women who deserve to be better known. Pakistan's women scientists, apart from these two brilliant characters sitting here, just to pay honor to them. Look at these women. Have they ever been known? Dr. Tasneem Zehra Hussain, acknowledged as the first woman scientist of Pakistan. Her field, an early dropout, and then she goes and becomes a BSc from Kinnaird, MSc from Quaid-e-Azam University, goes on to Harvard. Dr. Nargis Mawaliwala at MIT, she's the head of MIT, astrophysicist. Dr. Asifa Akhtar, Dr. Maryam Sultana, Dr. Sania Nishtar, a cardiologist, Dr. Salima Ikram, who's going to lecture in about 4 days, world-renowned Egyptologist, archaeologist, and that's scientist, Dr. Mahira Ghani, and Dr. Azra Qureshi, a botanist. These are outstanding women, and we should be proud of them. Their names should be known to millions of Pakistanis.
We should celebrate them for sure. I mean,
celebrating them.
Absolutely, Senator Saab, I couldn't agree more. Tanya, on the STEM side, with your vast experience of academic leadership, I know you would probably agree, of course, that the issue is real, but why are there so few women in STEM leadership in general? Is that the same misogyny that pervades academic sciences, or is that specific to STEM?
I don't think it's specific to STEM. I think it permeates culture. I think it has to do with the way women are raised, or girls are raised. We don't necessarily give them the confidence to stand up, to give voice, to be heard, and to walk into a room and own it. And that is what we think of as leaders and leadership. So I think that those leadership skills, and that's why I think your leadership courses for women are so significant and so incredibly important. We've spoken about role models, that you need a role model to say, I could be her. Not I could be him, but I could be her. I think as women leaders, it's incumbent on us to mentor our juniors and to support women and our female colleagues to take small steps to make life easier. And then I think we'll probably get to some of the constraints and things a little bit later on in the discussion. But I don't think it's specific to STEM, but I think it's amplified in STEM. And it's amplified in STEM or in some branches of STEM, so the non-biological sciences, in the technological, the mathematical, the engineering, because the women aren't there in the first place.
You know, I personally reflect upon my own career. And for the first 15 years of my own training, all my bosses were women. And they were fantastic mentors. And some of them were Pakistani, academicians. The obstetrician that I worked with as I started my clinical career, late Professor Zakia Minhaz, a giant of a woman, as you would know, Zia, as well, from our province, Razia Rahimtullah, here in Karachi, one of the first leader academic pediatricians of the country. So there has not been shortage of women leaders, but your point is absolutely well taken, that we have so few role models amongst women leaders that are celebrated. Without even naming and shaming anything, because of my recent project on looking at the history of public health in Pakistan, I've been exploring publications that have celebrated men and women in science, and certainly in health sciences. So in two compilations of science leadership in Pakistan from the 50s to, let's say, the 80s, centers out of 30 or so biographies in those compilation books, published books, not one woman. Not one woman scientist in the whole thing. And I can't believe that there weren't any, as I've mentioned some from that time, but very few really have been celebrated at that level, irrespective of their contributions. So yeah, let me ask you this question from this final, let's say, situational analysis. Is there any recognition at the level of the Higher Education Commission that there may be differences in terms of women in various fields who are coming for academic scholarship, training, research grants between the STEM field and non-STEM fields?
Yeah. As I said before, yes, the problem is there. We don't have enough number of female who are leaders in science and technology, and that's why we are here since morning. All our director generals are here, and we have taken a notice of this, and serious notice, and thank you to you for always pointing out this to me and our team. So we acknowledge this, and we are working. We have explored many ways how to improve these numbers. As earlier said by my colleague, the problem is the networking. So your network is your net worth. Maybe the female, they don't get the opportunities. A cup of tea after the meeting, a walk in the evening, a dinner at night. Maybe the female cannot do that, and they don't make this networking. So there's a gap between the leaders and them. So maybe there's some trust issues, that they are not approachable, they're not accessible, they are not flexible enough to be given a leadership role. I have been Vice Chancellor for 6 years, and I Vice Chancellor of 2 universities. So that's what I noticed, that in the Vice Chancellor, you see the guest coming to your house at the night and the weekends. The female cannot do that. The female cannot afford that. So this is a problem, and then the Vice Chancellor and the other big people who are making decisions, they think that there is a gap between them, so they are not giving them this leadership positions. But I agree with Professor Zara. This is very extremely important, that women, the girls, should aid these soft skills and the confidence in themselves.
Without necessarily having to breach social norms and barriers. I mean, I think there are restrictions, of course.
Yes, but this confidence,
but the system needs to create opportunities for women to rise in their disciplines without the need for this, without the need for having to do many other things, such as socializing, etc., that men can. So I want to pivot, perhaps for a few minutes, if I can, to the role of civic society, which you alluded to in your beginning, comments around the role of media, the role of, information systems. What actions can governments, and even before governments and political parties, take in this regard? I don't recall a single manifesto, maybe I'm mistaken, I haven't read the micro print there, ever having focused on eliminating and removing gender disparities in Pakistan, even if they had women at the helm of affairs of those political parties. Am I wrong?
Dr. Bhutta, by coincidence, I had the humble privilege of serving in the cabinet of the world's first Muslim woman Prime Minister, Benazir Bhutto Sahiba. After we strongly disagreed on information policy and I wanted to resign, she insisted, got to stay. I wanted to help this woman succeed and I wanted to remain in the cabinet. So she said, take some other ministry. I said, I'll take science and technology. She said, science and technology? What are you going to do there? No one wants science and technology. What are you going to do with science and tech? That is the kind of political mindset. That science and technology is something you give to people who you don't know how to get rid of. So the whole attitude at the political level, as you well said, is reflected in the lack of adequate depth and commitment in the manifestos. But more important than that, you can write something in a manifesto and do nothing when you come to power. And that is where the catch is, that there is not enough participation by civil society in political society. This schism, as if politician is a rogue personified by characters like me, civil society is full of saints, people who don't want power, they serve only the public good. But actually, unless you get your hands dirty and you know how to wield power for the public good, you can't bring about basic change. You can do it peripherally, but if you want macro change, you need to be in the mess of politics. And not enough civil society is participating in political activism to change political policy and action. Some are, but it's not enough. Mostly focused on human rights and women's rights, which is very laudable. But you have much more ground to cover. So there's a great challenge for civil society. Civil society, unfortunately in Pakistan, is too donor dependent, foreign donor dependent. Local philanthropy does not support advocacy for causes like this. They will support education, charity, health, madrasas, but not advocacy for changing attitudes and behavior.
And without that, I don't think we can get it on the agenda of the political parties, without that grassroots voice. So, Tanya, you've bridged a phenomenal field between science, law, administration, governance. How does civil society address this or help this in high-income settings? How was this done in Canada or in Australia?
So I mean, civil society, there's lots of organizations that support girls and support women, and they advocate, they're loud. But increasingly, you're getting more women in positions of political authority and political power. Whether that is high in the bureaucracy that survives governments and government change, or whether it's in the political sphere. So in Canada, the past Prime Minister made the commitment to have 50% of his cabinet as women. And I think that was a great gesture, but if you looked at the portfolios that those women got, they were not necessarily the ones with the most power, right? So I think that there's a difference between lip service numbers and appearance and actual and realistic power. Canada has still not had a single elected woman prime minister. The United States has not had a single elected woman president, right? So it's that almost there, but never quite. But I also think it's incumbent on women that do land in positions of power to assist those that come behind them. I think, and here I'll turn on on my own gender for a little bit. Sometimes there's a perception that I fought my way through and therefore others can too. So rather than opening doors, there's an expectation that others should have to fight as hard. And I think that's really sad. I think we need to sit and reflect and become better mentors for those that come or those that follow us.
So well said. Viva is in the audience. We have young daughters who are professionals and starting in their academic careers. And what we don't want them to do is to go through the same challenges that others have gone through.
Dr. Bhutta, there is gender inequity here. Too many women.
Pretty deliberate in terms of emerging scientists.
This is the
Zia,
first
let me turn to you
formidable.
in terms of how does a government organization like Higher Education Commission depend upon support from civic society in terms of addressing difficult, thorny issues like bringing more women up in higher education or in higher education leadership? How do you think civic society can help the HEC?
I think the pressures always works, and if we as a government survey sitting in a policy role, so we always feel this pressure when there is a talk by Jabbar Saab or any other person. So we feel that pressure and it comes into the practice today. Is the Vice Chancellor, you mentioned there are some 16, 17 Vice Chancellors, they too are the women universities. They're not the general university.
I did not disaggregate.
Yeah, so you won't see any beside very few vice chancellors who are from the general university for the co-education. It's only the women. So I think till we get these opportunities, we as a civil society and the government all should create these opportunities. For example, putting this into the policies that you must have this number of vice chancellors in general university who must be women. This should go into the leadership position. So we should impose this until it's done in a natural way.
I mean, I think imposing it is perhaps organically not as sustainable or does not have the same longevity as something that comes from within society itself. And what I am asking for is really how do we ensure that even government organizations that have their hands tied at times behind rules and regulations could still play an advocacy role in terms of influencing the cabinet, the political parties, in ensuring that they give a level playing field to women within those political parties and not as handouts, these are reserved seats, to give this to them on merit, to the Sania Nishtars of the world, who are able to stand for themselves and prove that they are better than others. Sarah.
So I'd like to make 2 points. One to the academic ladder, which is the timeline is an issue because you're on the clock, regardless of STEM or non-STEM. There's a certain period which is considered early career. And that early career period is thought to work very differently for women if they've had to take a break. So 35 and then 40 is the last cutoff. But if women have had to take a break, then they're slow on that anyway. And all the things we've discussed about how difficult it is to juggle, there's studies. The Economist published a survey on the motherhood penalty, which is compared across countries. So that occurs in all over the world, but they found it was the biggest in higher income country where the cost of childcare was high, and the smallest in China where people had multi-generational families. So, it's a social norm that the expectation that you must take care of your own child. And that, I think, is something that we need to accept is hampering women's progress, where the woman doesn't have to be the one doing all the work, either at home or for children, because culturally, even when people can afford it, the expectation is that the mother will do it herself, which becomes physically impossible. So all of these sort of feed into
I mean, the state comes in
norms,
with.
and then perhaps just coming back to Higher Education Commission and universities having facilities for flexible work and childcare would be hugely beneficial.
So, absolutely, facilities for childcare, facilities that include paid maternity leave for a reasonable length of time. Those are fundamental human rights and principles that are not applied because of market reasoning as to whether or not we can afford it. Of course, we can afford it because of the impact that it has on early child development. Salman Kirwani is here. He leads the program looking at the importance of that early nurturing period in there. But on flexibility, because there is a biological clock, and no woman should ever pay a motherhood penalty in terms of her own development and growth. We need to do more in terms of advocacy and working with agencies. Faiza Jahan, who's the chair of pediatrics sitting here, would recall that at the time when we wanted a flexible residency training program for female residents in my program, even though I was the dean of pediatrics at the College of Physicians and Surgeons, I had a dogfight with them at that time to try and persuade them that this would not be something that would cripple the educational programs or training programs elsewhere, because people were not willing to accept that. But we persevered, and it happened to the betterment of the development of skilled workforce for female trainees in child health. Well, I'll have one more round, and then we'll come to the audience in a minute. But I want to ask you, from your perspective and where you sit, what needs to change? If you had, as they say, the ability to change a few things in Pakistan to address this issue, what might you change, Senator Saab? If you were the Minister of Science and Technology, again, after 2.5 decades of being there, what would you change?
One would have to be structural. If by some mistake I were to be back in cabinet again, the separation of education from science and technology is a very lethal and disruptive approach. Science and technology needs to be integrated with education, not seen as something separate and to be shunted away to someone who's not in your favor. That's one. So integration of STEM and education without displacing the importance of social sciences and history. That would be one. Second, while with respect, something that is forced is coercive and therefore not spontaneous, sometimes deliberately taking decisions that change structures and introduce quotas can be very beneficial. For example, I had the humble privilege of being with General Musharraf when we introduced 17% reserved seats in all legislatures for women. 17% was about half of what we wanted, but we did 33% in local government. Now, the visibility of these women over the past 20 years has not brought about radical change, but has certainly influenced policies. Take Sindh, for example. Sindh is today the most progressive in pro-women legislation. Domestic abuse, domestic violence, early forced marriages, religious conversion, the integration of family planning with health under one minister, several such aspects. As a result of this conceptually different approach of making some decisions mandatory and ensuring that women get minimal, visible representation at the policy level. But it's still not ideal because it's through reserved seats. Now that brings me to my last and favorite recommendation, which is that there should be no reserved seats, that it should be mandatory by rotation over a period of 15 to 20 years. 25% of all seats in all legislatures must have only women candidates, so that after 20 years, the entire country is obliged to elect only women to represent them every 5 years, 25% or every 4. year. So that will give women a new authority and pivotal role in influencing policy. So those are possibly some steps.
those are very progressive ideas, and we pray and hope that maybe you will get an opportunity again.
Certainly,
We
very
need,
shortly.
we need people like this or thought processes like this. Tanya, what might change things
So,
from your
so I'm
perspective?
going to bring things down to a lower level because I do not have the power to influence democratic process. So I'll bringing it down to the institutional level. These are not new issues. We have been grappling with them since I was at university and before. I have two daughters, and I've watched them through the education system. One went into engineering, and then into medicine, and the other into drama and and teaching, and so I've seen the full gamut. You referenced the leaky pipeline. We know how to plug the leaks. We simply don't do it. And I think your points, Dr. Hassan, were absolutely the critical ones. When we're talking, so early stage, it's getting girls interested and focused on science and making sure that they're protected from social media and their peer groups where being interested in science, mathematics, and technology is not cool. We have to make it cool, or the girls won't be there. There is so much that parents have no influence over kids and the influences, the social influences that they face from their peers. So that's one piece. The second piece is, when we're getting them into university, into graduate school, these are just simply put biologically peak reproductive years for girls. They're thinking about families, about marriage, about whether they'll have children. When I was an undergraduate student, I had one female professor as a role model. I love that you're in OBGYN and the medical professions, but I was in the sciences and there was one woman the entire time. And so there was no understanding of the issues that women faced, whether it was sexual harassment, including from our professors or from other students, the safety of the classroom and the environment. And then working through the system, the simple, biggest and most important issue to confront is the additional burden of being a woman in terms of family responsibilities and childbearing. That is the biggest policy plug that we need to fix. We need to have low cost and affordable daycare. We need to help educate our male colleagues that when they're married to a wonderful woman, maybe sharing some of those domestic responsibilities is really important. And that is a fundamental cultural change. And here I'm going to put that a little bit on mothers as well. Mothers, raise your sons to be able to be good husbands that support their wives and share the responsibility of the family life and the home life and the home. That is the other biggest cultural shift. And then within the university, it's matters of making sure that when we're looking at promotion packages and other things, that we are reflexive of the leaves and the additional burdens. And so I think that in Canada now, for example, for grants and for other things, we take out, it's as if those years don't exist that women have taken off for child rearing. That has been the single biggest policy change that has moved the needle microscopically. But we still don't have the pipeline to get women into the hard sciences and the technological sciences, the computer science, AI, and tech fields. So we need to plug the pipeline. Sorry, I've just gone on a little rant for you. There you go.
And that we've recorded all of this. So in terms of how do we walk the talk, Tanya, you've committed yourself to a whole decade of efforts here. Zia, Higher Education Commission, what can you do from the Higher Education Commission to overcome some of these systemic barriers? I mean, you have fantastic leadership within the HEC itself. One of your topmost directors is here. Nargis is here. Tell us, what can be done better?
So since I am in this office for the last 2 months, so from the day one, I am in this discussion. This is one of the top agenda. So what we have done with this fantastic lady Noor Amna is here. She is the head of the NAHI, in which we is an organization made for educating or more training of the faculty. So what we have done that we are now starting a leadership course for women, and have already approved this. The money is will be transferred to her. So we are starting this across Pakistan, and we are targeting young ladies at assistant and associate professor level, and we taking them as a cohort, and we will try our best to give them the skills and courage, so and also the certificates to them, and these certificates is the academic leadership. So we are expecting them that we will work with them. So the next 10 to 15 years time, they will come to the front. So that's number one, which we are doing. Your program, this Women in Science, we are very happy to take it and scale up as well. So that we acknowledge this is a wonderful program, and I have seen this at the ground level, and I've seen the difference. You made this into these women, and working with these women, how you have changed them. So we are happy to take this
Well,
and
thank you.
scale up
Thank you
across the
very much.
country.
And what
Across
we
the,
want the Higher Education Commission to potentially do is to take it and improve it. I mean, Dr. Noor Malik is a leader in the field of developing women leadership. And I think ours is an early career women sciences training initiative. If it can be married to additional leadership development components, I think it'll be a win-win for all. What can you do as a scientist on the ground, Zara? Somebody who has walked the talk, but tell me now, if you were to help others, your postdocs, your fellows, your PhD students, how can we bridge this gap?
You know, we've talked about so many important things, but I want to share that during the COVID pandemic, we worked round the clock in the diagnostic labs, and there were phenomenal staff working together with us, and particularly there were two girls who were living in the hostel. They were from Gilgit-Baltistan, and because they were on site, even when people were dropping like flies, getting COVID and weren't coming up for night duty, they were there, and they were just phenomenal. And one day I was so touched because this girl, she turned around and she said, "Ma'am, you're my hero." And I was, my heart went out to her. I said, "You are just so phenomenal." And I hadn't realized that my being there, for example, had made any kind of difference. It never occurred to me because we do things, and I think we're not aware of self-aware enough to know that we can make a difference. So I think coming back to role modeling, just talking to people, trying to understand young scientists, students in programs, undergraduate, master's, doctoral levels. It's important to understand what issues they may have that might be solvable easily, either by a little bit of training or skill development. And I really think that all our girls need is more confidence in many cases.
Networking, collaborations, mentorships, role models. I mean, we've heard so many important things here. Now, I would like to now turn this over to the audience. We have time, let's say 20 minutes. I would like to propose that you identify yourself very quickly, no major comments, ask questions clearly as to who you would like to address to, and we'll try and get through a large number of people here. We also have many leadership of Aga Khan University represented here. I'm very pleased that the dean is here. Karim, thank you for coming, and chairs. So, floor is open. Okay, Junaid, and then we'll go back to you.
Yeah, I'm Junaid.
Go ahead.
I'm Junaid Iqbal. I'm Assistant Professor of Research Department Pediatrics, and I also have a very relevant and proud introduction. There's 6 PhD students who are pursuing PhD with me, all of them girls, very ambitious, very talented. So my question is that in a highly stratified academic landscape like Pakistan's, when you have these gender equity initiatives like Women in Science or maybe Scholarship for Women, how you make sure that these are transformative, these are inclusive rather than benefiting those who are already privileged, already have access, already have resources, already have networks. Thank you.
So, who are you addressing this to?
You and
No, I will pass it to Zia. So the question is really, how do we make sure that these approaches, etc., are equitable?
I think this is very important question. But see, this is our limitations. What we have done that our target is that we will give our scholarship to almost 35%, not the scholarship, the research grants in the next 4 years. This is my tenure for 4 years if I stay there. So for 4 years time, this is my promise with you, sir, and with other, that we will increase this research grants to up to 35 or 38%. This is our minimum target. But the same is for the travel grant. Same is for any other activity which we are doing. So we are adding this into our agenda in our call. You will see this soon. But then coming into the equity, I think this is we are all dependent, and I have not thought about this to be honest, because we are getting proposals from everywhere in the country. So it's from Khairpur, it's from Punjab, it's from Gilgit, it's from Chitral, and all other universities. So, but then to look deep into their socioeconomic status, this is something we need to work.
So yeah, you had mentioned in our conversation this morning, Balochistan. You know, I think to bring many provinces and many regions in KP, bringing the universities of Kohat, Bannu, Dera Ismail Khan at par with others, these will require some deliberate investments in capacity development and encouragement, particularly of women scholars and academicians from those regions. So there is a way of perhaps addressing some of the current inequities through targeting. So I think targeting might be something that you have to start with the landscape analysis on. Who is where, what do they need, and how do you make sure that they get it in an appropriate time frame?
Okay, thank you. Hello, everyone. So I am Abda Shaheen, and I am Professor of Pharmacology at Shifa College of Medicine, Islamabad. So apologies in advance if I have a loaded question. So first of all, I would like to refer to patriarchal bargain, because we all women, we know that we had some kind of patriarchal bargain, and it started from home. It is part of our social fabric, and it went to our institutes. The way we handle negotiations, we handle conflicts, that is extremely different from the male perspective. And most of the time we are very accommodating and avoiding style of conflicts handling even at our workplace. And then we have, because you mentioned about the top scientists and the top achievers in female sector, but then we have intersectionality in those cohort as well. The female with privileged backgrounds and the female with resources and those who have been exposed to are luckily, fortunately, part of any organization and blessed with such resources at the very early stage of career. So I want to know about this, that when you are talking about that the female at the top hierarchical position, the visibility of female leaders, it becomes less, because the networking options are not there. Females are not part of those networking events. And so what kind of cultural shift do we need at our institute so they become part of those networking events? Why not in the morning slots?
Well,
so this is my question.
Let's have Senator Javed Jabbar answer that, if you can. It's a very important
question. Yeah, absolutely. And my response, Dr. Bhutta, is not because I want to avoid the academic facet, which is very germane and important to this particular forum, but only to share with you, and I go back to Benazir Bhutto, who, despite that remark about science and technology, who wants it, was a remarkable woman. Remarkable also for the fact that she was surrounded by men in power, who were not very keen to admit her to that inner circle. for the first time, a woman calling the shots. The president was not too keen. The chief of army staff was very uncomfortable. The other service chiefs were uncomfortable. The leaders of the opposition, who were very vitriolic and hostile, to the extent that she was extremely emotionally affected by the hostility that she witnessed. So, it is not exclusive to academia. It is a general political dilemma. How do you handle this? And the first and foremost is courage and perseverance. And they can go and shoot themselves in the foot. Carry on, nevertheless. Don't be fazed and don't be intimidated. And that's asking for a lot. But that's how I saw her handle that aspect. And do it without compromising dignity. Her feminism did not decline as a result of any compromises that she had. She maintained her dignity, her composure. So, I mean, every individual is different from the other. But yes, that could be a role model. But one has seen women in Pakistan and other fields also doing extraordinarily well, despite the patriarchal dimension to which you refer. And there is a need to learn from that.
There's a cohort effect, a network effect.
Yeah.
Now we have a number of hands up, so I'm going to take them in this order just so that we can get them. So Faiza, then Maha, then we'll come to you, and then Dr. Saab will come to you. Okay. So why don't you go ahead if you have a.
I just wanted to second to what Dr. Zia was talking about when my colleague talked about inclusivity. So Higher Education Commission, just a small comment and then I have a question. Higher Education Commission, to be specifically, has this tagline that it's inclusive, equal opportunity for women, and then women are encouraged to apply everywhere, anywhere. There is no quota that you can't go beyond that. And that is what he was talking about. Very recently, we had a women empowerment mentoring program for 18 women universities. See, there are 18 women universities in Pakistan, 17 in the public sector and 1 in the private, which is in Karachi. And in 3 months' time, we in fact gave them 5 areas in which whatever limitations, issues, psychological, social, professional they had, we had internal mentors and mentees who helped each other. And now because of the success, very kindly my executive director has approved the overall mentoring program. As he referred in the beginning, that now men are feeling bad, that what about us? Because we also need that. So this is in fact, from our side, we're trying our level best, but I've got a question to ask. Since I worked very closely with the women universities, don't you think we are also to be blamed for it? Because as my senator talked about the reserve seats in Pakistan National Assemblies as well as provincial. How many of these women did anything? What legislation did they do for women? Nothing at all. Most of them are relatives of the politicians who come by, because they're not elected. As he said, this is the way forward, that they should be selected, not elected, and then they should be made a part that constituency would only have a woman leadership coming from there. So we are partly to be blamed. I'll just give you one example that there was a harassment case and all women, instead of taking side or just supporting that lady, were actually, gossiping about her, victim shaming. So don't you think this is a question open to everybody? We're trying our level best. I am supporting him, and as he's saying, we are up to it and we're going to do more and more, whatever we can do. But, and then also you have to understand the networking issue. I'm sitting, I think, the senior most person, but I would be always very hesitant and going and, sitting, maybe he says that come at 8 o'clock. The other people will say 7 o'clock, whatever late, oh, she was there, something is wrong. So there's a social mindset also, although there is nothing wrong in it. But don't you agree that we women also are to be blamed for it? Because we also undermine women. We also, even at the family unit, we think, we underestimate us. We can't do it. We should not apply. This is a man's job. I think we should not do it. So these mindset issues also crop in the internal mechanism of women, including myself. So don't you think that is also a perspective we should look into? Thank you.
It is a civic society social issue, of course. But I think we also have to look at mechanisms and ways in which lessons or exemplars could be shared so that people know that they are not facing this problem alone. Yeah. And that amidst all of this adversity, amidst all of these challenges, these social barriers, whether they're at the level of the highest level of the government or at a more local level, that people still find their way. They're not exceptional people, but they're people who have perseverance, who have the strength of character, who have the staying power, who also have, very importantly, a family milieu which is generally different. We say behind every successful man is a woman. It's not necessarily
No.
true.
Behind every successful man is a woman telling him he isn't.
But it's also true that behind many successful women are strong family structures, supportive husbands, and that's what Tanya was alluding to. So we need to be teaching our sons. Faiza.
At the risk of being repetitive, so the kind of work I do, I'm chair of pediatrics and I work in global maternal health, where inherently networking is really the way to get your inroads into getting like good grants, being able to attract talent who can work within your teams. For the first 10 years of my career, I could not travel because there was a silent responsibility of childbearing and child rearing. And I saw my male counterparts who were much younger than me, who were able to do all of these travelings. And we are working on the same grants. Incidentally, the principal investigator of that grant had to move away. And that grant, in terms of the engagement, should probably have been handed over to the gentleman on my team. But surprisingly, it landed in my lap. And when I had my first meeting with the other PIs, they were very surprised. Who is this person? Where is she from? Why does she have that? And I think that step, where a man or a woman can take for a woman in science who is trying to raise a family as well as trying to work, can make a huge difference to the career trajectory of any woman. And as a leader now, I ensure that I do the same for others. But, I really want to point out that we really underscore the importance or, the barrier that childcare and home responsibility places on individuals. Even with servants at home, there's a huge cognitive burden on the woman to ensure that everything is running smoothly. And that mindset, it's so difficult to change behaviors. If we could change that, or if we could make that as a smaller barrier for women who are working in STEM, it could really make a difference. So, yeah.
Some of those barriers have to do with mindsets, as you rightly point out. But I know for a fact that you got that position on merit, not because that they gave it to you. Maha. Yeah, yes, please. Yeah.
So, some of the things that we can do are actually also about funding eligibility, right? So what are the things that we can do in our funding structures and our support structures that would actually enable career advancement? So we know that personal attendance of conferences, it's both the outputs and the networking opportunities, are incredibly important for career progression for any scientist. And so why isn't childcare or travel with your children to a conference an eligible expense on your grant? This is something that we have actually changed in Canada. And every conference that I have ever organized, I have made it a priority to be able to ensure that we have childcare available for women to be able to bring their children. I have been to many a workshop. I stood in Alaska at a wolf control caribou conference full of people from the Fish and Wildlife Service and others, standing with my baby on my hip, swaying from side to side, trying to keep her quiet and handing her over to somebody else while I gave a presentation. It's not the easiest way that you can do things. So I think one of those things that you have raised in terms of being able to support women to bring their children to conferences, as opposed to having them stressfully stay behind, is how do we plug the holes? We find solutions for the.
Well, I think we bring children to conferences, we need to make sure we have childcare so that people can attend the sessions.
Yes. So my question is for Senator Jabbar. I work with a lot of young people, fresh graduates, even youth who are deciding on careers, what they want to get out of life, what their long-term career trajectory might look like. And what I'm seeing is a lot of people with degrees in STEM, with master's degrees, with PhD degrees in very specialized fields, they're not able to find jobs outside of, academia, and those positions are very hard to come by. So in the last couple of years, there's been a lot of, I think, desperation, people moving abroad, trying to just find jobs that justify the amount of time and resources that they've spent getting these very, advanced degrees. And at the same time, people with a 4-year bachelor's degree in something, financial service related or some other field, even some people who, have completed high school and they're in, let's say, fashion design or something more profitable, they get ahead very, very quickly. At least they're financially stable at a very young age. So how can you address that leak? I see a lot of people switching careers as well. They might have had an undergraduate degree in science or engineering, and then just because they're not able to find something to support themselves or their families relevant to their field, they've had to switch careers and look for alternate opportunities.
Yes, it is a big challenge. It's first of all a public policy challenge to create an economy that is constantly creating new opportunities for livelihoods. That's a global challenge for all economies. How to keep pace with population growth and youth coming out of educational institutions. We have the opposite in a sense. We have the honor of having 26 million children out of school. Migration per se is also a global phenomenon. People are constantly moving. That's the pattern of history. But also in Pakistan, while our official economy is down the tube or now beginning to recover, our online economy, our gig economy, it's called the gig economy, is one of the world's 5 largest. Out of 200 countries in the world, Pakistanis are so innovative, and many of them are young people who are no longer going to an office 9 to 5 because they haven't got the jobs. Many of them are women working from Sakkar, Faisalabad, small towns, Hyderabad, online, or doing freelance work. So there is this great scope for innovation, opportunity to create small micro-level enterprises. And there are opportunities available for financing, for startups and so on, not fully explored. So I have hope. And lastly, bring down the population growth level.
It'll happen. If women are empowered, that will happen, Senator Saab. I mean, Syed Khan is an example. Now, I see a number of hands up, and we are down to our last 10 minutes, but I'll give you the floor, and then I will ask people to make quick interjections, and we'll decide who takes what. Please, introduce yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Laila Ladak, Associate Professor and Associate Dean at the School of Nursing and Midwifery. And my question is towards the HEC. So previously, the understanding was that nursing is a female-dominant profession, and now the trend is changing, particularly when we talk about higher education for masters and PhD. So at the baccalaureate level, the number of females, they start up their career, but males are the ones who end up in doing PhDs and masters. So apart from a lot of socio-cultural reasons, some of the other bottlenecks, for example, finances, and the flexibility in terms of teaching learning modality. So as a mother, it gets so difficult, and I also went through the same, that should I be spending whatever the assets that I have on my education versus on my children? So that's a difficult question, and especially in this part of the world where the expectations from a female is very different. So I think from that perspective, HEC does provide scholarships for masters and PhD, and also some of the research grants. But I think some of these opportunities could be dedicated specifically for the females, that this is the number of grants or the tuition fees, scholarships, etc., specifically for females. And also the flexibility in terms of modality of teaching learning. So for example, it gets so difficult for someone to relocate to a university to do in-person classes versus having the opportunity of hybrid classes. So some of these things which I think we can, or maybe HEC is already thinking on those lines. Thank you.
You not thought this before? thanks to this man. He's doing this. So as I promise that we are giving this special quota in research grants. The women are doing brilliant. I'm telling you. I just saw this NRPU. You might have applied for that. And it was some phenomenal. We have kept this double blinded. I've seen it. I can see it from my end, and this wonderful PIs who, on their merit, have been shortlisted for round 2. But the next year you will see that you will have a special quota for the female, and this is my promise with this forum. Yeah, inshallah.
So let's take a few final comments, questions. Fawzia, then Salman and Sidra. So, and then we will give our panel. But before I give the panel a final word on a question that I'll ask you, I will give the floor to the Dean to say a few words. So, for college. But the Dean who's here. Fawzia.
My name is Fawzia. I'm a faculty at the Faculty of Arts and Science at AKU. My question perhaps could be AKU and HEC related. I think that systems are deliberately designed for women to fail, especially women in science to fail. I have a feeling. Because you come in, you try, you apply. Ultimately, for example, my identity as a scientist has been erased because grants that I'm getting because of inaccess to science is in the outreach. So now when I'm introduced as an advocate for environment, not as an environmental scientist, whereas our male colleagues who are not doing any science or outreach are still introduced as researchers, engineers, scientists. And I have a feeling that a lot of this happens because decisions for early career women are made by mid-career or senior men. So what in HEC or AKU are we doing in terms of decision-making for young women, especially young women in science? And are there deliberations? Is there future for women in science? Because quite frankly, almost everyone tells me, why are you still in Pakistan? Why don't you leave Pakistan?
Just quickly, because recently we sent 43 female STEM teachers, lecturers and assistant professors through Pak UK project, and we stopped these process till such time that they were equal to the number of male teachers. And those 43 ladies have come back and now they're cascading in university. So we cannot say this that we are not encouraging that. There might be some instances, but we are making sure that if women are not there, we do not move ahead. That is the policy.
All right, let's get the additional questions. Salman, Sidra, and then come to you, Dean Dimani.
So if imagine there were no women's universities in Pakistan today, the first proposal were to come to you, would you think this is a good idea and that's the way we should go? Or do you think that sets up women to then seek out opportunities in women's only environments and maybe not the best idea?
Sidra? So I'm collecting all questions so we can.
So I'm Sidra, Associate Professor in OBG. I'm an obstetrician in the room and I deal with the maternal health. So what social and cultural reforms we could take to empower the woman, because the woman in our country is not empowered even to take the decision of her own health, her own family. As you said, the family planning, it's all failed because they are not empowered to decide. So what cultural and social reforms we could further take?
So I'll ask our panelists to address these questions in your closing remarks, which I'll come to you in a minute. 15 seconds.
I'm Zoe. I'm an assistant professor at AKU. So there's lots of cases of women not feeling safe on campus. For example, last year, IOBM had a case where a woman made a complaint of sexual harassment and was expelled and only reinstated when the faculty and students actually protested. So there's a larger question about women actually not feeling safe on campuses and institutional procedures deliberately not doing anything to address that. AKU may be a bubble in this respect, but most women will go to public sector universities where they don't feel safe. What is the role of institutes like HEC? What is the role of academic leadership across this country in helping women feel safe in campuses so that they can continue their education?
It's a good question. Dean Damani, I'm going to give you a few seconds to, maybe you haven't asked a question, but maybe you can make a comment.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bhutta. Karim Damji, Dean for the Medical College. in Pakistan. So just a comment is that, look, I feel very fortunate to work in an environment where I think we have hope for women to progress in ways where we can enable that progress. I myself am fortunate to report to a strong woman leader, Tanya, who's terrific. And I think that my role is really to listen carefully to the women themselves, right? Whether they're students or faculty or in other positions, and then see how we can continue to enable change. So I think that's what's important. Thank you.
So I'm going to give our panelists a final round to not only respond to the questions that you've heard, but perhaps tell us one key takeaway that you might suggest as a key action that we could take as a nation. I'm not even talking about individuals, organizations. What can Pakistan do today, Senator Saab, that would help bridge this gap? But you can also obviously answer the question that related to social empowerment, please.
Apart from a dynamic, long delayed, overdue change at the highest political level to make gender equity as much a part of public discourse as, for example, family planning needs to be and has never been, that has to be the first step. Second, and lastly, responding to our friend's observation on social and cultural change. There are three elements where a human being's attitudes are shaped. One, in the family, first and foremost. Second, in an educational institution. And third, by society at large. In my humble view, while the family is important and society is indispensable, it is only within an educational institution that you can eliminate or try to eliminate the biases that come with every family and with society at large. Every family has a bias. Shia, Sunni, Ismaili, non-Ismaili, rich, poor, black, brown. Those are biases. Within an ideal classroom, biases are supposed to be eliminated. All students must be equal, which then focuses on the need to radicalize our training of teachers, our change of curriculum, to make the classroom the crucible for change, where formative attitudes and behavior begins.
Thank you so much. Tanya, what word of wisdom would you have for us?
I'm going to be careful in the expansiveness of my answer. As a foreigner working at Aga Khan University, I'm very conscious of my position and my role. So it's not my place to address the larger social challenges for Pakistan. But as a university administrator, what I can do is to support the research and the evidence generation that is relevant and impactful for making policy changes around women's empowerment, not only in Pakistan, but around the world. And I think we do that. Dr. Buddha is a tremendous example of leading the charge on the international stages to advance women's and children's rights and their health. So that's the one piece. The only piece of recommendation that I might hint at, and this is something from my own experiences, is that when you're making large-scale policy changes, you need to listen to the constituencies that are most affected. And so having tables of women scientists that are actually advising on what their needs are and what the policy reforms that are required are is absolutely crucial. So listening to the constituencies. The second piece I would say is it's fine to have policies. Policies are wonderful and on paper. I'm a lawyer, I write lots of them. But unless you implement them, they're not worth the paper that they're written on. And so the enforcement mechanisms are absolutely crucial to ensure that the policies have some teeth. And the final thing from an institutional perspective is, again, it's the listening to our constituencies and then making those systematic changes, even if they're relatively small scale, to improve the quality of life for our female students and our female faculty and our female staff. And I would start, at the real fundamentals, and some of that is around childcare networking and mentorship. Thanks.
Wow, I mean, amazing, and absolutely, completely concur with a stepwise approach and an approach that actually deals with some of the fundamental issues in various contexts. Zia.
So I think the first is the acknowledgement, and I'm happy that we are here in acknowledging that this is an issue and discussing the way forward. We as a nation, the Pakistani, must know that with keeping women at home, we can never be a prosperous country. We can never be, you can never develop. So we must acknowledge this. Our religion starts from Khadijatul Kubra. And what was she known for? She was a businesswoman, an entrepreneur. Her skills, her money were used for the religion, the startup of religion. So if we deviate from that, we can never prosper. And once we acknowledge this as a nation, then I think there are many ways, there are always ways to find solutions. So we as Higher Education Commission are 100% committed to this. We have bigger responsibility. Because we are the one who will give this leadership, and we should play our role as a facilitator, how these young beautiful ladies and our tremendous talent, and we should find ways for them. So I acknowledge that this is a big responsibility on my shoulder and our team's shoulder, and inshallah we will not disappoint.
Well, you're here, and the fact that you've spent the whole day with us listening to not only the background but participating in this frank discussion is a tremendous show of solidarity and your commitment to the issue. You get the final word, Sal.
Yes, thank you. Wonderful. And I'd like to address Salman's question about girls' university. So my early education was at a girls' school, and I was, annoyed that my parents put me in a single-sex school, and my brother got to go to a co-ed school, which I went to later. But I also realized that, and it's different now because times change, that I ended up as a teenager in a girls' school, then going to a co-ed school, much more confident about doing science and seeing female leadership at the school level than my peers were. Because when I went to the co-ed school, I saw that the girls were less empowered. So it depends, I think. We can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. So hence, if you got rid of female universities, you might lose all the young women that are only going to universities because their families allow them to go to a safe space. The trouble is, once they at university, do they always stay as being the other, or are they able to engage with male colleagues in the workspace? And that is a challenge that needs to be addressed.
Fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, we are on time. We are actually at time. We had planned 90 minutes. I think Tony alluded to the policies and programs. And
HEC, which in fact has been trickled down to all 282 universities
Yeah.
in Pakistan. And we are all signatories to it. All vice chancellors make sure that everybody follows it. And if there is any issue, there are anti-harassment policies and committees. People have to report to them, and then proper action is taken. Unless and until people do not report or complain, there are issues. I totally agree with her. There are loopholes in it where there is a victim blaming, shaming and all, but HEC has put that policy in place.
so all I'll say to that is there are policies, they need to be implemented, not stay on paper, and then there needs to be accountability. So without monitoring and accountability and actually holding yourself up to a standard to say what have we done in terms of implementing this and what is our external validity, I don't think policies matter. Ladies and gentlemen, my barometer for a successful discussion, discourse session is always if we have ended up, or at least I personally have ended up by being more knowledgeable at the end of that session than I was at the outset. I can tell you safely, this has been one of the best sessions we've had. And I am so very grateful to our fantastic panelists, starting with Senator Javed Jabbar, Professor Tania Bubula, Ziaul Haq, Zara Hassan, for having led us through a fantastic session. Thank you very much. We can...
No. One cheer for the moderator. Very good moderator.
We can not thank you enough, but as we close, I'd like to offer you some tokens of appreciation, which are all environmental friendly, and they are based on what we thought would be things that you might value. And may I request our provost to kindly give this to Senator Javed Jabbar, along with a copy of our book, because he's got to sign his for me in a minute.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much.
And may I request...
Oh, sorry.
Oh.
Yes, yes. Everything for the camera. Thank you.
And may I request Dean Damji to come and do the same for Ziaul Haq from the Higher Education Commission, and also give him a copy of our book. Thank you so much. Appreciate all the support. Thank you. And not to be forgotten, Tania, this is a little something for you. This is to encourage you to also come to see our Matiari site before long. And
Thank you.
thank you so much. Thank you.